Lettie West, and I am delighted to be joined with Annie Hall from Love Made Me Weddings. Hi, Annie.
Hello.
So I just wanted to start talking about London weddings, planning London weddings, because hopefully this summer is going to be the new roaring 20s of parties and getting back into it. Before we go into kind of the whirlwind that has been the last year, I wonder if you can just tell us how you got started in wedding planning and tell us a bit about what you do.
It's a long, strange story, as I think most people in niche careers kind of have one of these like histories. I studied French and Italian at university, so I think that kind of romance side has always been in me somewhere, and I wanted to use Italian for my future career. And have always been planning kind of dinner parties, events for friends, family. And so I have no idea where wedding planning came from, to be honest, but I'm quite organized. I like all that kind of thing. So I think the Americans would say type A. I'm not sure. I'm reading about that at the moment. So I was just working temporarily after university in Oxford and contacting loads of wedding planners in Italy, just asking if they needed an assistant, someone to make the coffee, because I wasn't a wedding planner at that point. And out of the blue, this company on Lake Como in Italy applied to me saying it was in August after I graduated. If you can come over in the next 2 weeks, the job's yours. We'll train you on the job, and then by next summer you'll be planning your own weddings with us. So over there for about 3 years, as a freelance wedding planner, but working alongside colleagues, and over about 2 summers planned about 35 weddings with gorgeous glamorous couples, all English speaking, but from England, America, Australia. And so really it was just in at the deep end, and the majority of my planning has been learnt from doing that.
I mean, Lake Como, that's amazing.
Very different to London.
Yeah.
But I would argue now that London is more exciting than Lake Como, and a lot of people would think, most people I think would think that's mad. But genuinely, the London wedding scene has so much more to offer. Lake Como is great, destination weddings are great, but really all it is the destination. And so I came back to London because these weddings in Lake Como were stunning, beautiful, and a lot of people love them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they were all very similar. You'd have, bouquets of white roses, limoncello shots. It was all very following a program. And I think that couples are so individual. Like, one person is individual, but then if you have 2 people together, there's nothing else like it. And so weddings need to really reflect that. You want to be a guest at a wedding and see aspects of the couple who you're celebrating kind of around you in the day, woven in. And then also the couple, they'll never forget, that kind of thing. Everyone gets what I'm saying, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. I got married last year, and it was, quite an experience, but I completely agree with you. I wanted it to be something that was personal to us.
Yeah, definitely.
And that you, as guests, it turned out we didn't get many guests because we got married in October, but to have everyone who was there to remember it and to recognise that we were the ones getting married. It wasn't just anyone. So I completely understand the cookie cutter kind of weddings that you were used to out there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Where did you get married?
Wow.
In London?
No, I grew up in Aberdeenshire, and
Okay.
I always knew I'd be getting married in Scotland. Funnily enough, after 6 months with my now husband, I told him that I was getting married in Scotland, and he said, "Well, you won't be marrying me then." 4 years later, he proposed.
That's quite a strong opinion. Why hate Scotland so much?
No, I
No, he
think
doesn't.
no. At that point, he'd only been to Scotland once or twice, and he hadn't really fallen in love with it in the
The
same
wrong
way
impression.
that I had. But I always knew that I had quite a specific idea of what I wanted. I wanted to get married in the church that I grew up in,
Lovely.
be able to get ready at home, and
Yeah,
just all of the things that I knew I'd grown up wanting. Obviously, I also wanted a very Scottish wedding, and yeah, and it didn't take any convincing at all
very
when
good.
I got engaged. He knew. So, where do you think is the most memorable venue that you've ever been to a wedding? It's not necessarily one that you've planned.
Um, I the most memorable wedding I've been to would have to be, it was in Lithuania.
Wow.
It was a family friend. I was quite young. But maybe sometimes things when that happen when you're young stick in your mind more, so maybe that's why.
Mm.
But just absolutely completely different to any of the weddings I've planned or been to in the past, because they had so many traditions, as I imagine and kind of have learnt recently that the Scots do as well, that are so make sense but are so bizarre. So, for example, when the couple arrived after the ceremony to the reception venue, they had to walk through all of the guests and carry out specific tasks that were like traditionally what the man and woman would do. Maybe it's not very gender fluid for these days, but it was, it was tradition. So he had to chop a log in front of everyone. She had to put a nappy on a baby, like a doll.
Wow.
It was all very, very funny. And whilst I reckon they were probably slightly tipsy, because on the way there we had to stop on a specific bridge and everyone had big shots of this kind of Lithuanian spirit. It was all very wild. And then there's later on in the night, everyone was spinning around and dancing to these traditional tunes. I don't know. It was great. They lived in England, but her family were from Lithuania, so they went to have the wedding there.
Mm.
And he was Irish, so you had this kind of combination of this Lithuanian family and this Irish family, who I think are both quite big drinkers.
Yeah.
And these traditions, and they merged together so well. And yeah, you could have been either in Ireland or Lithuania by the end of the night.
Yeah. That sounds amazing. I think, yeah, anything that makes it a little bit different makes it more memorable, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Rather than just talking about what you ate and what the dress was and things.
Yes, yeah. You almost learnt whilst you were there about them more.
That's amazing. Okay, so talking the fact that you just said that Lithuania was obviously quite a powerful place for you to go for a wedding, and we've talked about Lake Como and
Yeah.
London. What's the power of a great venue for a good
Okay.
wedding?
Um, I think a venue needs to know what its thing is, its selling point. I think, as with any business or anyone in the kind of wedding industry, you are not going to please everyone. But what you do have in your skills are fantastic. And so many people would absolutely love to kind of take part in that. So, for example, London Scottish House, I think, has one of the best properties any venue can have, and that is a lot of different spaces available for either different purposes or different times of the day. For example, you guys have that glorious main drill room, which is ideally suited to the reception, because you've got all the space, you can have all the tables out there, high ceilings, it's really drama, great. Entering that after a ceremony, not having seen it previously, would really, I think, take anyone's breath away. Then you've got that great balcony at the top. I sound like I'm selling your venue, which
Yeah.
I want to do anyway, so hopefully this helps. But you've got the balcony, which could be used for musicians, could be used for speeches, like, and the Love Actually wedding, when the musicians pop up,
Yeah.
you could have moments like that. So you guys have those spaces, and you have the underground space, which could then change it from like a traditional classic wedding into something a bit cooler for younger or more alternative couples who wanted to kind of have a bit of a disco moment down there. It's got those concrete walls that a lot of industrial venues these days sell, the archways, the warehouses.
Mm.
So yeah, having lots of spaces where you can travel from during the day with your guests and like leave it as a surprise
Mm.
keeps everyone interested, keeps everyone engaged, and allows you also to have different themes to the day. So yes, a good venue needs to know what its strong point is, and then find couples or attract couples who they know will enjoy that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and that completely makes sense, that work out what it is that's special about that place and
Yeah,
what they can offer. And so as a couple, as you're looking for a venue or kind of looking at what's out there, working out what you want as a couple is quite
exactly.
important. Yeah, as you
Yeah,
talked about the kind of story of the day, working out what you actually want the day to unfold like and finding a venue that suits. So if you
yeah,
wanted to have everything all in one place but still having different elements to it, London Scottish House would be great for that. But then you've
yeah,
also got the idea that you maybe would like to have a religious ceremony, and so having somewhere that is close enough to your chosen place for that ceremony to be able to get to within a reasonable time frame, because nobody really wants to be trekking across London even if it is on one of the double-decker red buses for
I
an hour.
mean, I think I would argue again, if you fell in love with a venue over there and a venue, over there in London, there would be ways of making it fun and enjoyable. I don't know why more. There's probably a huge thing I haven't thought about here. Don't quote me on this, but I don't know why more wedding parties don't use the tube. Like, I think that would be a laugh, like great fun.
Yeah.
And what could be more London? Say you lived and worked in London, that's kind of part of your life.
Yeah.
Um, Also, some, like you said, couples um, need to think about what they want in their day and then find a venue accordingly.
Mm.
That's true, but also there are the couples who, I think, they're overwhelmed with the amount of inspiration out there that sometimes they actually don't know what wedding they want quite often.
Mm.
Also, I find that more often coming to me because they're looking for help with a wedding planner,
Mm.
just to kind of clarify their ideas and shape them in the right direction. Because girls have Pinterest boards and boys have Pinterest boards, and it all just comes together. So often, also, the first step of planning your wedding is to visit a lot of different venues,
Yeah.
and then when you're in the venue in person, that is when you suddenly realize, yes, this feels right. Like, a lot of couples talk about feel.
Mm.
um I think that's very important too. So there is hope if you're not sure what you want yet.
Yeah, well, that's exactly how, one of the ways that you can help, not only helping kind of with the intricate planning, which is very, very stressful, but also kind of helping to distill down what it is that the couple really wants. So
Yeah.
a wedding planner is always useful for that. um, do you want to talk a little bit more about why London specifically? I mean, you've already talked about different elements of it, but why London specifically is such a special place to get married? I mean, you said you came back from Italy to be back in London.
Yeah.
So do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So um I have such a passion for London. I have never been anywhere that it's so cliche, but has such a buzz. There is like the absolute wealth of creativity in London, um, and just absolutely something to suit everyone. It's incredible. So there are florists who will do dried flowers, florists who will do only greenery, florists who grow their own flowers, florists who import from, hopefully still, Holland. You know, you could have at your wedding like only tulips from Holland, because in London 100% there'll be a specialist florist for that. Um, the catering, the food and drink scene is also very exciting, and I think that's only growing now as well, especially during lockdown. A lot of creativity has come from it, I think. People finding ways around closing their restaurant. Um, and so yeah, it's just the suppliers, because at the end of the day, that's what a wedding is. It's all the suppliers coming together in a great venue. Um, there's also small little details that make London great. For example, if you have a lot of international guests, you could fly to Heathrow and then get the tube to the venue on the same day if you wanted. Um, then there's lots of hotels around for that as well. The transport within London is great. There's activities, things to do either side of the wedding day. So you could have say you were coming from Scotland, for example, for the wedding to London. You could come for the week, have your stag and hen do's earlier in the week, because there's so much to do, and you wouldn't worry about bumping into each other either. And then go to the airport and go on your honeymoon. You know, everything is there. Everything's exciting. It suits all cultures, all religions, anything. It's just exciting. I think that's the only thing I can say.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you sold it. It's as you say, everything is all in one place, but so spread out that you don't feel like it's all on top of each other.
And sorry to interrupt. One important thing to note is I have a lot of couples and people who got married in the past saying it's all very good, but we love the countryside, and we have this ideal of being surrounded by green space. We like the classic country look. And again, there are so many venues within London, often more on the periphery, that have green space. And I had a couple last year who postponed to this year, who were looking for that. And in Southwest London, they've found the venue. And when you're in the grounds, you could be anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's something that a lot of people don't really realise, and if you've only been to specific parts of London or you've never been to London, is that it's all concrete, when actually we're very lucky in London to have a lot of green space and a lot of space that is kind of dedicated to that, and then also for weddings, great venues that take advantage of that. And also you as you say, it's all around, so you don't have to say, right, Southwest London's the only place that I can go, or I need to be smack bang in the middle of Hyde Park, because you absolutely don't. There's lots more green space. One of my friends was supposed to get married at Dulwich Library last year. And you know, all around Dulwich there's some amazing places to kind of enjoy that countryside feel. So yeah, I mean, sounds pretty amazing. So for any couples who have just got engaged or are at the start of planning their wedding in London, where would you recommend that they started, apart from coming to you?
Not necessarily, no. The venue, we've spoken about venues forever, but it is the venue. Once you have the venue, Sometimes that comes before, sometimes that comes after knowing how many people you want to invite. Those two kind of work in tandem. So you could either know for sure that you want 100 people, so then you look for big venues, or you're not sure how many people you want. You find a venue that's max 50, so you're happy to fit to that. Because once you have the venue, usually ideas will start tying up in your head. You'll notice the venue style, which sometimes it can be a blank canvas, which is great because it means you can, dry hire, add all your own little touches to the day. Yeah, so once you have the venue, you have more of an idea of what it's going to look like. You perhaps choose suppliers local to that area. You don't have to. You can start with the logistics. You know where the ceremony is going to be, where the reception is going to be. So then you realize, oh, that space looks perfect for a band. Do we want a band? Do we want music during the reception? It kind of all the questions come from finding the venue. Post after that, my suggestion would be, and this is what I do with my clients, is just to go step by step through each aspect of the wedding. It's very easy to become overwhelmed when you've got one email chain about flowers, one about if the bakery can drop off the cake in the morning, and then you need to find out from the venue if their fridge is big enough. But then at the same time, your florist is saying, because of Brexit, only English flowers available. Do you want these instead of these? If you stick to one thing at a time, sort it out, you can then tick it off. And then 6 weeks before the wedding, you can then go through everything you've planned and just check that everything lines up, if you get me. So venue and then one supplier at a time is what I'd suggest.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. What's
Yes,
the biggest disaster that's ever happened on one of your weddings? Because I
I
have
don't,
several.
don't. I remember discussing this with a couple last year. And I think it's so important to be honest, be open, be yourselves. Because no one's perfect. And I think the kind of social media at the moment builds up everything, not just weddings, but also lifestyles, people as perfect. And there's always problems, there's always going to be a problem. And the best thing to do is just go head on at the problem, be open about it, be honest, say this has happened, but we can find a solution. So I had no fear in telling this couple last year at their cake tasting about my biggest wedding nightmare. And then at the same time, everyone else started sharing problems that they'd had in their own industry. So for example, what mine was I was planning a wedding, and the couple had a traditional wedding cake, 2 tiers, maybe not super traditional, not three, 2 tiers. And they also loved, the groom was a chef, and he loved cannoli, which is the crisp kind of sweet batter filled with cream from Italy. He loved them. The bride hated them, like actually hated them. But she was like, that's fine. I'll have the cake and you can have the cannoli. So the few hours before the wedding started, the bakery delivered the cake. And it looked great. And the waiter put it in the fridge for us, and was like, "Oh, it's very light, isn't it?" And I was like, "Oh, it's the sponge. They wanted a very light sponge because it's a summer wedding, so they wanted it to be airy for the guests so they could keep dancing." And then it came to the cutting the cake. Everyone was crowded round. Photographers were posed ready, like great photographers ready, top class. And I just kind of stood back because I always am hidden in the background. You can't see me. And a lovely moment when the couple cut the cake. And in wedding cakes, I always warn the couples that sometimes the base layer is polystyrene, it's fake, because it's used just to kind of keep cake standing. So I was like, you need to cut about 3 inches just towards the edge, because the middle will be polystyrene. And they started to cut, and she was like, no, like looking at me like, Annie, this is not working. And I was like, oh, try the top layer. Sometimes they switch it. And so they were there like smiling, cutting the cake. And basically there was no cake. It was all base. And what the bakery had thought is that we just needed cannoli. And the bride was angry to begin with.
Yeah.
But we managed to talk to the caterers at the venue, and they brought out extra cake for all the guests, which was really kind of them. And those who like cannoli ate the cannoli. And the next day, she was like, "Don't worry, it's absolutely fine." In the end, I think they enjoyed the dessert brought out by the venue more than they would of cake. So yes, that was mine. But then when I was telling this story with the clients, um, the baker that we were cake tasting with, she said her boyfriend had a similar problem at work. Had a problem at work, but his biggest ever problem, lost his company like £3 billion or something. And she's like, but it's all relative. So for a wedding planner, that is a nightmare. But for a banker, it's, it's all just, yeah. So that was the biggest thing that's ever happened, and probably the only real thing that's ever stuck in my mind. There's always little problems like rain, but you can't plan for problems, so you plan to be ready for problems. And when they happen, it's just, it's part of the fun.
I mean, the things that went wrong with our wedding, it just didn't matter at the end of
No,
the day. It just did not matter. I didn't care.
it's not even a problem on the day. It's just it comes part of your day, doesn't it? And what I do want to say is that the one what I predict, and I think a lot in the industry do, and what is great, you've got to try and find a positive. Obviously, this last year should never have happened. Hopefully, never again. But a positive of it is that couples, I think, have learnt over this year more about what they want from their wedding. So it's split the engaged couples into two camps, and it's predicting the wedding trends for kind of late this year and also next year, where it's either going to be like your wedding, small weddings, because people have realized actually who's important to them this year, who they've kept in touch with, or what's important to them. Like, rather than having a big party, they actually just want to have a relaxed meal with all the people they haven't seen for so long, and those are the people that count for them. And then the other end of the scale, there are the people who just cannot wait to get back out there. They've missed big crowds, they've missed that kind of buzz. So there's going to be also a kind of celebration and a big increase in very luxurious weddings, because not only have couples saved money this year probably by not doing as much, they're also going to be celebrating and seeing everyone again. And then the smaller weddings, sometimes also people have lost jobs and they realize that they need to spend their money on making a smaller wedding, but just as good. If you go smaller, you can have a more bespoke menu, you can have more expensive flowers, you can have a nicer venue. So I think the weddings in the middle of about 50 to 80 people will take longer to kind of become fashionable again, I think. So yeah, what you have done, I think, is not rare at the moment. I really hope that we see a lot of kind of big dancing anniversary parties for people like you know? Your
Yeah.
second anniversary, just a huge disco.
How has COVID changed weddings?
Okay, so I think it's given couples more time to think about what they want. So we're going to see an increase in smaller weddings, receptions at restaurants, for example, rather than big dance parties, like you say. Even less couples getting married because they've realised over this year that perhaps they don't need to, and that they can, live together and not marry at all. It's also going to see an increase in bigger weddings, big spending, luxury. As you said at the beginning of this, the Roaring Twenties, they're going to come back for sure. And also, like the pandemic combined with Brexit is going to see, and the trends at the moment, a big increase in using local suppliers. A lot of people during lockdown were having kind of fruit and veg boxes from their local people rather than going to the supermarket. That's going to translate into weddings, and I think you're going to see a lot of independent businesses supported more and local businesses supported more. Great for the kind of carbon footprint, great for supporting small independents, and also great for encouraging personalization. Couples will hopefully start to get the meat for their wedding, for example, from the butcher that they go to every Sunday. That kind of thing, I think. So big, small, and local.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, and what would you say is your favourite thing about your job?
The fact that every single person I meet and talk to is completely different. Couples, especially, always just from different aspects of life. They have different influences from the world, different religions, different likes, different dislikes, all like that. And then in wedding planning, you either are talking with the couples or the suppliers. And then again, being able to talk to so many different suppliers, see so many different things on offer. It's great to know that there's one type of everyone out there. So yeah, that kind of creativity combined with the planning aspects, I guess. It's a job where you have all aspects of a job in one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. What would you say you've learned about yourself over the last year that you would like to keep as part of you, if that makes sense? So maybe a new habit or something that you have only just kind of become aware of about yourself in the last year that you want to make sure you kind of foster.
Yeah. I think I'd say patience. I think before lockdown, before everything, the pandemic, business was busy. A lot of things were happening. Everyone was trying, and not just me, everyone was, I imagine, was trying to fit a lot into their lives at once. And it's just made everyone slow down a lot. And in the wedding industry, and hospitality in general, because it's been kind of yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. In planning, you want to see into the future. That's the nature of the job. And having that taken away at the beginning was panic. What do we do? We were used to being busy. Now we've got nothing. We can't even plan ahead. But if it's really taught me patience and just to be able to kind of step back and just wait, and it will be, fingers crossed, okay. And I think that's something I'd like to keep going forward. because it definitely creates a more level head when you're working if you're able to take time for everything. And it's also something I think couples engaged in planning a wedding at the moment would also benefit from, and I'm sure they are. Just not letting the fact that they're not getting married now get them down, and just know that if they're at the moment, they're laying the path for the good time ahead, and patience is everything.
Yeah, it will happen. It will
Yeah.
happen. Yeah, I think that's a great thing to keep, is the patience. I completely agree. And finally, what's the best piece of advice that anyone has ever given you?
Yeah. That's an impossible question. Oh my gosh, I have no idea. What's the best piece of advice? I don't know. I think I'm constantly um I was listening. This is not someone's given to me. Hopefully this counts,
Mhm.
because I'm sure there is. I'll kick myself when this is done, because there'll be something someone lovely said to me and I'll be like, that is it. Um but I was listening to Sophia Loren's Desert Island Discs the other day,
Mhm.
and if you want to feel a bit cheesily inspired, just listen to the first 2 minutes of that, because she is all talking about she's talking about passion, and she's saying that if someone feels passionate enough about something, anything, um you've just got to dare to do it, because if you have the passion, the dare will pay off. So it's just about having the courage to make a decision, do something in the first place. You won't regret doing it if you've got the kind of correct driving force and passion behind it. I guess that kind of counts. If I wish Sophia Loren had told me herself, but
No, I think that completely counts, and I think that's a lovely place to end, especially if we think about weddings, and if you're planning your wedding, putting your love for each other at the forefront of it.
exactly, that's what
Um,
it's all about, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, keeping that in your mind at every hurdle, everything that slightly goes left.
Yeah,
Always remember why you're doing it, and I think that translate into work life, love life,
anything.
everything. Yeah, so that's a lovely place to end. Thank you, Annie.